I have the pleasure today to introduce to you our keynote speaker. But to do that, I think we all need to kind of roll back in our minds to 1994. That's the year that, as legend has it, Robert Stevens was riding around Minneapolis on a bicycle, starting up the Geek Squad. 1994. That was, I think Al Gore was just putting the finishing touches on this thing called the internet. And I think laptops then, I think they weighed about 10 or 11 pounds apiece. And so I'm kind of wondering how you did that on your bicycle, but I'm looking forward to hearing a little bit more about that. But we've all come a long way in that time. Now, the Geek Squad employs, I think, more than 20,000 agents, I think is what you call them, across the world. And technology, as Dr. Summers was just alluding to, has driven a great deal of the change that we've seen. It's interesting, Minnesota has been the kind of a hotbed of entrepreneurship and technology growth for many, many years. It's not an accident that Minnesota is one of the has probably the greatest number of Fortune 500 headquarters of all the states in the country. We have in Minnesota a wonderful combination of education and entrepreneurship and work ethic that has permitted us to create an environment for continuing growth and excellence. And the Geek Squad is no accident in that regard as well. We're very pleased to have with us today Mr. Robert Stevens, the former CTO of Best Buy and the Chief Inspector of the Geek Squad. Mr. Stevens.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. So a number of months ago when I was asked to speak to you this morning, I didn't know that my moving truck was going to be arriving a little ways I walk on the stage. So I know I'm scheduled to do a Q&A session from 10 to 11, but I'm hoping to kind of just squeeze the two together. So I'm going to try and wrap by 9:30 for your break. But I'll stick around for a few minutes for anybody that wants to do Q&A. But if you know what movers are like, you got to keep an eye on it. So I have to get over there. And the topic of my talk this morning is really about change. The great thing about being a geek is that every day you wake up, some part of your life is always being upgraded. And like how you just look for that little red circle now on your iPhone or your iPad for all the free updates that you get on your apps that you get. So when you're a geek and you live in technology, you're used to change. And moving is such a pain in the ass. It makes you realize why companies don't change and why people resist change. It's a lot of work. I'm disrupting my entire family by moving to California. I'm disrupting all sorts of things, but I'm going to talk a little bit about disruption and what's going on, and what makes it so exciting in the education space, which is one of the areas I'm most excited about. Because I've been a geek since I was a kid. But for the first time, you don't have to be a geek anymore to take advantage of all this technology, and that's what's so exciting. That was the whole reason for the Geek Squad, was to help ordinary people do extraordinary things with technology. So I'm going to just give you a little background. First of all, this is my Twitter account. This is what my business card is now. I love the Geek Squad logo so much, even when I joined Best Buy. Not that I have anything against their logo, but I didn't want to put two logos on my business card. I thought, I don't really need a fax number. How often do people actually mail anything anymore? Do I really want actual phone calls? And my email, I feel like a lot of people have so much email already. So what does it really need? Well, with Twitter, you can, if you want to find out what I'm doing, go there. If you don't even know what these characters represent, it doesn't look like an email address. If you type these characters into Google, you'll get my blog anyway, which has a link to my profile, which actually has my work number listed on there, because my work number is actually a Google Voice number. So if you call it, it just transcribes your voicemail into text, which goes into my email anyway. Yet I don't have to kind of reveal some of the other contact information. So it makes it very easy. And yet it's so simple. It kind of causes people to do a double take. Anyway, so what's also significant about Twitter is that when Skype came out, everybody thought that conference attendance would dwindle because, well, now we can all just, telepresence to each other. And nobody will meet face-to-face anymore. They do this all the time with technology. It gets kind of old hearing it. And CD-ROMs came out, oh, it's the death of the book. There's not going to be any more books. That was in like 1990. Then the DVD came out, oh, it's the death of the movie theater. Nobody's going to get together anymore. We'll just stay at home. Conference attendance, the number of conferences, has doubled since 1999 when Skype first came out. That was 13 years ago. Remember when 1999 felt so modern? You feel old, Jens. With Twitter, I just came back actually from Jackson Hole, Wyoming. I go to a conference every year. It's called the Internet Cowboy Unconference. Internet because it's mostly digital people, cowboy because it's Wyoming, which is a great contrast, by the way, to get a bunch of tech people to unplug. Because Wi-Fi is crappy in the Tetons, which I am very grateful for. It's called an unconference because I recommend you look it up on Wikipedia, but it's a format where people just show up and there is no agenda. There are no sessions. And people create sessions and sign up. So it has the lack of structure. It's who shows up that makes it interesting. But before I go every year, I look up the list of attendees and I start following all of them on Twitter. So I can see what they're reading, what they care about. Because what's great about Twitter is that you can share what you're reading, and it's just much more efficient. And it's less annoying than clocking up people's Facebook timelines and adding more email or info. So if you want to know what's going on with me, that's where you go. And it allows conversations to begin before the face-to-face. And it enhances it. Because as a sign of respect to show people what I care about, I do homework. So if I walk up to, an author or something like that, I'm like, oh, I loved your last book, or I saw that article you wrote in Forbes this weekend. And it totally changes the dynamic of having a first-time conversation. You already kind of feel like you know somebody. And then the best part is the conversations get better when you're face-to-face. And then after the conference is over, the conversation continues online. I've already had like 5 people contact me in the last 48 hours, just through Twitter. So, and I also find out how people think about my talks, because I'll go, I'm writing a book right now, and how I'm writing the book, though, is based on the number of retweets. So if I get like 5 or 10 people that all tweet the same quote, that tells me, and that might make a good chapter title. So it's kind of like I'm basically letting you do my work for me. So a little bit about myself. I was born in 1969. In fact, this past weekend was the 43rd anniversary of landing on the moon, which I'm not saying I'm special or anything like that, but I do think it's pretty cool. Like 1969 is a great friggin' year, okay? We landed on the moon. I think it's still the greatest accomplishment in all human history. Sesame Street, Mr. Rogers started in 1969. I grew up on public television. I'm a product of it. And also in the fall of 1969, the first packet on what would become the internet was sent that year. Now, a few other things about how I work and how I think. This, to me, is one of the greatest movies of all time, and the greatest movie when it comes to learning how to run a company. I mean, that's what this movie's about. This movie's about corporations. It's about product development. It's about intellectual property protection. It's about morals and ethics. It's about CEO succession planning, talent management, branding. It's got it all. It's great. I just watched it. Whenever I see it on TV, I cannot turn it off. Because what I love about it is I see myself in Charlie. Charlie just is an ordinary kid. He doesn't have any money. He's not super intelligent, no other superpowers. And he's a kid who just tells the truth and works hard and saves his money. And it also answers a key question. As a founder, I know what it feels like to build something that you care about a lot. Who do you sell that to? How much do you charge for something you love? I said, I went to Best Buy because I knew they'd probably never sell it. Versus when you take money from investors, at some point they need to sell to get the money out so they can buy a ranch in Wyoming. But Willy Wonka understood that he couldn't sell the factory. He could only give it to someone. It's the only way to preserve something you care about. That question becomes more and more crucial because as YouTube and Twitter make the world more transparent, good leaders rise to the top and the bad leaders will be exposed for who they are. Customers will be recording these calls for quality purposes and posting them on YouTube. Batman and Robin, I grew up on the real Batman and Robin, Adam West. Here's another person who's in the service business. They make house calls, they work 24 hours a day, he knows about branding, the importance of uniforms. Batman tells us about the problems of most companies, that they don't take time to look at the little details. You know? Responding quickly, being polite. When Batman walked into a bar on this TV show, what did he order? He ordered milk. Another movie about an orphan. I'm the first generation with the microprocessor. Oh, by the way, when Willy Wonka came out in 1971, that was when Intel's first microprocessor came out. When Star Wars came out, so did the Apple II, the first personal computer. And you can draw a direct correlation between the moon landing and the microprocessor and, Willy Wonka and Star Wars. Another movie about an orphan who has to challenge authority, has to challenge and find their own path. And I think there's a direct corollary to today's people. I wish I was 10 years old again. You can be 10 years old, you can film a high-definition widescreen movie with special effects. Edit it, all without ever touching a computer. You can do it with an iPhone and an iPad. You can get a TV show deal, and you can broadcast whatever you make in your backyard on YouTube. It's a legitimate channel. So, what's great is that we have all this kind of cultural heritage about the individual doing a lot with a little. Then I go to college, and I see the web for the first time. I moved up here in 1990, and I went to art school before that because there were more girls in art than there were in computers when I was in high school. So I thought I wanted to be an artist, and I realized I wanted to be a starving artist, so I came up here to the University of Minnesota, and I saw the first web browser. And this is about how the internet was around for 20 years, technically, but it was locked up because nobody could access it. But with the browser, it made it easier. And this is when technology gets interesting, is when you take powerful technology and you make it much easier for everybody else to use. You take away that elitism. And it's a super exciting time. And this is what caused me to drop out of college, because if I could learn how this operated, and it was driving a lot of people to buy computers, but nobody wanted to make house calls. Now first, a little kind of quick overview of why we are Geek Squad, not Nerd Squad. There are many different types, and everybody's a geek at something. You can be a music geek, or a food geek, or a wine geek, or an old car geek. We're in the era where there are no limits to your personal passion, what you can do. And you know when you love what you do, when you get up at 2 in the morning and you scribble that idea on a notepad, or you stay up late working on a recipe. There's so many passions we can pursue. The big challenge for the new generation is they just have so many choices. There's no excuse really not to pursue your passions, because it's relatively so inexpensive. Regardless of your income, you can get an iPhone for, if you're a billionaire, you can't get a better phone than what the average person on the street can get. Yes, you can have a private jet, but for a few $100s you can fly across the world. Things are relatively inexpensive. There's very little barriers. With $30, you can rent 1,000 servers from Amazon for a month. It's just amazing what's going on. It's getting easier and easier to do that. But I wanted to capture the intelligence of a group of people, a healthy obsession without all the social ineptitude. So that's how Geek Squad was born. And the best thing that would happen to me is I had no money when I started my company. If I had money, I would have hired a PR firm, hired branding, and all the other things that you're supposed to do. But I didn't have that. And it's not that I'm against advertising or anything like that, it's just that I think when you start, you're going to build something that lasts. I think you have to start, just like when you're a kid, the best kind of imagination that you love to see your kids do is when they make things out of scrap material. It requires much more creativity. You know, it's why kids have more fun with a refrigerator, cardboard box in the driveway than those bleeping gizmos that we buy, and they get bored with them about a month later. So ramen noodle for me is a symbol, an international symbol for struggle. And therein lies kind of the paradox of large corporations. Why do large corporations, which have more resources, more power, seem to have more difficulty in innovating? That's what I set out to learn by going into Best Buy. Because most founders and most startups, they get a lot of press, but they rarely grow beyond 50 to 100 employees. Or if they do, they rapidly either get kicked out because they've exceeded their skill set. It's one thing to be a bold, brash founder, and it's easy, frankly, to manage 50 to 100 people. But try doing it for tens of thousands. And I wanted to find out what are my limits and stuff like that. So, but when you have no money, everything you do is advertising. Everything you do is marketing. And it kind of implied the new era of design that we're in right now. We're in a major revolution in design, whereas I had to make a choice between art and technology, but now the compromise between art and technology is almost evaporated. Video, touch-based, I mean, the computer's getting more human. Use your fingertips now, and pretty soon your gestures. Somebody filed a patent last year for lip reading from a camera cell phone. Why would that be useful? Because right now you'd be able to text the babysitter or the daycare facility or whomever while you're sitting here without even having to tap or type. You'll just be able to look at it and speak through your lips. So I drew my own logo and I kind of wrote all the software and did all the accounting. I was the PR department, all that kind of stuff. And it forces you to make choices. And it's good preparation so that later when you have resources, you use them more wisely because you appreciate them. And you remember what it was like when you didn't have money. My greatest fear is that when I was going to get my first Geekmobile, that I would just be another car on the freeway. I mean, on your way here today, we've all passed each other on the road before in town, but we didn't know it because everybody looks the same. It's the same thing in the yellow pages. It's the same thing online now. Do you really pay attention to any of those Facebook ads? That's why their stock is still $28. This is the great challenge. How do you differentiate? And anybody can teach an online class. Why are they going to take yours? So I looked around. What do most companies do? Well, they put cars on the road. They tend to buy minivans. And they tend to apparently cram as much crap on the side of their car as possible. Think about it. This is like the business card. What do you really need on the side of a car? I mean, are you really all paying attention to all the text on every vehicle that drives by? Of course not. In fact, if anything, if you wanted to stand out, you'd probably do less. And what happens when a company puts less? It's like a movie that doesn't... You ever watch a preview in a movie theater and feel like you've seen the entire movie at the end of the preview? And that usually tells us subconsciously, that director's not very confident in this movie. What we want from brands is kind of a subtle confidence where they don't reveal everything, like how Apple's able to keep its secrets, like Willy Wonka. And do you really need even a phone number on the side of a car? I mean, when you just Google it, now you can just tell Siri. And then you look at the billion-dollar companies, and you start to see a pattern. The real companies tend to not cram a bunch of stuff on there. Even FedEx used to be called Federal Express. They tweeted their logo. It's as if they knew Twitter was coming. You could have predicted Twitter because Twitter is nothing more than CB radio combined with text messaging. In fact, CB radio is just an audio version of the telegraph. These things repeat over and over again. The best way to predict the future is actually to read history. And UPS has gone even farther. They've eliminated all language. They're just brown. They trademarked the color. Their trucks are brown. Their uniforms are brown. You will face questions like this. I think a lot about online learning. How do you give an experience? How do you communicate what you have? through a two-dimensional video window, and the quizzes and questions, and the other new things that you'll have to create, because you don't have the advantage of atmosphere. How will you cheat? What kind of Jedi mind tricks will you pull on people? I've heard people say that there's a bit of an issue that if people struggle at a certain point, they almost have to learn how to learn in an online environment. You're going to have to solve some of the same problems I solved when I grew my company, which is how do you stand out? How do you differentiate? How do you adapt for what you know in one context for this whole new context? The answer is to steal the ideas. Picasso said, good artists copy, great artists steal. All the problems you'll ever face in how to reinvent learning online have already been solved. They've just been solved in disguise in other areas, in other industries. I stole my flat rate pricing from rapid oil change. I stole my ideas of vehicles as advertising, partly from FedEx, partly from UPS, mostly from Batman. What Picasso meant is that if you want to really innovate in online learning, do not study other online learners, or if you do it with a grain of salt. Be careful of that temptation. Otherwise you might be a copycat. And nobody likes a copycat. But stealing means to take concepts that have some universal truth that can be applied from one industry to another. So read about psychology, study hospitality, study hotel lobbies. All those little things. Study weathermen. These are people who only can communicate information for a few minutes in a flat 2D space, you know? Little things like that. And then you start to look at the world, and it's like having a metal detector. Knowing what you're looking for increases your chances that you'll find it. But you have to think about what is it are you really looking for. It's like having a metal detector for you. Then you know which tones to tell the difference between nickel, silver, and gold. So Batmobile led me to this. It's a 1958 French Simca Arande. Looks like a Studebaker, and it's like booger green. And I slapped the logo on that. I just drove around town. No phone number. I didn't want to get too many phone calls. This is when the internet first came around, and Super Bowl commercials advertised .coms. And remember when all the websites crashed and how embarrassing that was? And it was just me in the beginning. People used to say, I see your cars everywhere, and only one. Then you start to think, aha. There's ways to trick the mind. You will have to trick the mind into making people feel more confident, more curious, adapting the curriculum information. You have a very, very fun and interesting set of challenges ahead of you. And it feels like what it felt like when the web first happened. Like a whole campus. You could start over. We're at that point again now, and that's what I'll show you. I'm not going to go too much into Geek Squad history. You know that for a while it became Geek Squad Antique Auto Repair, but the goal was to be different. I wasn't worried about the quality of the in-home experience and stuff. That was easy and fun. I was natural at that. So what I wanted to do is I didn't have any money for advertising, so I used my cars. I looked at things like, well, the problem with the cars is that they didn't all visually look the same. Again, I knew I had to solve a problem. How do I get a bunch of unique cars but have some visual motif that unites them all? And that's the key. Your job is to break the rule while obeying it at the same time. To break the rule means how do I stand out from every other car? How do I avoid buying another damn minivan? But to obey the rule, how do I make it so they look like they're part of one company, not just some weird psycho-techno gang? And I'm watching the Andy Griffith Show. And then I see this, the black and white. It's almost a symbol of Americana. It's embedded in the psyche. When you see black and white, it actually, I think, triggers some kind of flight or fight response in the medulla, the primitive part of the brain that excretes hormones and adrenaline. Recently in the Twin Cities, have you noticed the police have started painting their cars black and white again? I wonder who they're freaking copying now. They abandoned that paint job in the 90s. I don't know why. I want my police cars to look intimidating. I want them to look friendly. So I give the cops crap all the time. They were complaining. Then they're not complaining. They're like, we're getting pulled over, being asked tech support questions because people think we're going to be Geek Squad. That's when the copier becomes the copied. And it's all the problem. If you know what you're looking for, you have a much better chance of finding it. That's the challenge you have. And then I went and bought a 64 Falcon. And it looks great. And then, when you do this, it's like you're cheating the laws of physics. You're bending the universe to your will. And then every once in a while, luck hits everybody. The doors of opportunity do come before you. And as luck would have it, you take an American icon that comes back into the world in 1998 and solves all my problems for me. The black and white paint job looks great. The logo looks great. There's no phone number, no domain name. Domain names are dead. With Google search, good search on your hard drive, you don't even need files and folders anymore. Every photo you take now is encoded with GPS coordinates. So you don't even need to look at when you took a photo, you just need to look at a map. Where are those photos I took in Jackson Hole, Wyoming? Right there on my iPhone, right there on the map. And look how clean that looks. It looks like the Google start page, just a search box. Now think of the Yahoo start page in your head and all that noise. Thank God Marissa Meyer's going to come in and clean that company up. And that'll be important for you. There'll be a tendency to put all this technology to differentiate, to add a bunch of crap. My advice is, ask yourself, what can you take away to simplify the experience? Make it elegant and clean. Do you like a menu that has 400 items on the menu when you get to a restaurant? Or do you like it when it's just like, I love this, it's like not too much choice? And then it becomes a system, and it works very well. It works anywhere. These are our Keepmobiles in London, because the parking is really, really tight there. And if it gets really tight, these things are so light we can lift them up on the sidewalk. And it was funny because then sometimes people just struggle. Everybody at Best Buy was like, well, we can't paint the cars black and white in London. They don't have black and white cop cars there. I said, not yet. I said, I've been in Beijing, and they have reruns of Law and Order there too. It's just a matter of time. When we went to China, they said, we can't call it Geek Squad. I'm like, why not? You better have a damn good answer. And they're like, there's no word for geek in Mandarin. I said, that's even better. You're telling me? First of all, the Chinese philosophers, Lao Tzu, Sun Tzu, they were the first geeks in the world. Do not tell me the Chinese who invented so many technologies do not have a word for geek. They also don't have a word for art because they don't think of art as something separate from what you do in daily life. A chair, a piece of furniture, the design of wallpaper is all considered to be imbued with artfulness. So the reason they don't have a word for it is because they don't keep it separate. That's why marketing is everything, is operations, it's everything you do. You can't fake who you are anymore. Do you really believe those British Petroleum oil spill commercials with the birds and the flowers? We don't believe press releases anymore. We know politicians aren't telling the truth. And we know that every email and memo they ever really send will be leaked. Lastly, the uniforms. All the polo shirts are like the minivan of clothing. And I'm sorry if you have a minivan, and I'm happy for you if you do, but, we all must find our own way to rage against the dying of the light. And for me, the polo shirt is I just didn't want to bring another one into the world. And all the colors were taken. And I really feel sorry for T-Mobile, who ended up in pink. And Home Depot had orange, and even though orange is my color. So what am I going to do? How do I break the rule? To break the rule is I have to stand out. But to obey the rule, I have to have something that looks professional. And then, like I said, when you know what you're looking for, it pops you right in the head. 1996, Apollo 13. It reminded me of all those films I was watching in school in the 70s and 80s, because they ran out of school funding in the 70s, so they kept showing the same damn NASA science films in class from the 60s and the Mercury and Apollo era. And I saw this, and instantly I connected a number of things. One, it's a uniform. They don't know it's a uniform because, two, I know geeks and how they think. And geeks don't give a crap what they wear. They think functional. They think they like a computer. And I knew that geeks had problems with personal hygiene. Hence the short sleeve. The geeks were engineering subconsciously, and then they started copying each other. That is a more efficient form of dress. The only thing I did was that when I gave them, told them this is your new uniform, they actually said, this is awesome, we don't have to worry about what we wear anymore walking out of the house. That's actually one of the most common feedbacks we get from the Geek Squad. Now there are some people who apply to work at Geek Squad and say, I'm not wearing that uniform. It's become a wonderful litmus test for humility, one of the most important traits. Because I heard what you said for years. I'm so glad you're here, Robert. That last person here, they were rude to me, they made me feel stupid, and they never explained what they did. They talked down to me, they didn't keep their promises, you know? That was, if there was one great contribution I feel like I've made to the world, it was to give you friendly service in your home and to rid you from the curse of having to read manuals. So, but when I gave them all ties to tie, I've never seen so many different origami knots in my life. Then Andy Griffith popped into my head. You know, cops wear clip-on ties. You know why cops wear clip-on ties? Why do police wear clip-on ties? So they don't get choked. Same reason we wear them. You people get really pissed when your printers don't work. Or sometimes the PC jam loads and you're like, pulls it. Now the tie just pops off. This is what's so fun about business. This is what's so fun about entering a new space, like online learning, where there are no clear answers, and you have to solve them. You just have to be comfortable with ambiguity. And just focus on, you know, and I recommend going back to the history of learning. Because when you look at universal human truths and universal values, themes will reemerge, which give you a hint of how to predict what will happen in the future. Most technologies today are just repeats. And look at Twitter. Would you have predicted Twitter would be here? If I came to you 20 years ago and said, hey, I'm from the future, I'm from 2012, it's 1992, and you're like, oh, wow, tell me, what is the future of written communication? I just got this thing called WordPerfect. It has a thing called spell checker. It's really cool. So in the future, like, am I able to like type things and it composes beautiful, like Hemingway-esque prose? Not exactly. The most powerful form of written communication is a service that limits you to 140 characters. Text. Would you like to invest? It's going to be a $10 billion company. Would you have invested? Really? Oh, it's called Twitter. And there's a $40 billion company called Yahoo, and the other one's called Google. Well, that doesn't sound so good. Tell me about the state of video communication. Is it like holograms like in Star Wars? Or video telephones everywhere like in 2001? Not really. The most powerful form of video communication is a postage stamp size service called YouTube, consisting mainly of farting cats and people falling videos. The last thing I'm going to tell you is, you might think the Geekmobiles and the uniforms, I've talked about cosmetic things. Is that all Geek Squad is? After 18 years, is it just a bunch of funny gimmicks? Is that what keeps a company in business? In my business, my product, my factory, are my people, the agents themselves. I brand the agents, that's why they're called agents. That's why Target's so brilliant to call their customers guests. Language matters. Language is one of the first ways you differentiate and establish a culture. That's why pharmacists have this weird-ass handwriting. It's their way of keeping secrets. What I learned is that uniforms and all these things, they matter. They're going to matter to you. What you wear on camera for video lectures. What does the background look like? I judge people by their Skype backgrounds now. Audio quality, color, all these things, all these little details. You're going to do the same thing I did. I'm using what I have. I give them real badges. That's when I realized most of the Geekmobiles and stuff like that, people always ask me, where do you find your geeks? I don't. They find me. It's like I'm sending a signal out, like a message in a bottle. The people show up and they're like, I just need to work here. Because I do want to be Batman, but for real. And also, a company is a social network itself, a closed-loop social network. These are Geek Squad agents lined up to go see the Iron Man premiere a couple years ago. And we encourage that. Why? Because when they're standing in line, they're sharing information. They spend a lot of their time alone, between house calls, going to people's homes. It's rare that they get together. Most hospitals can't have a barbecue out back on a Friday night. But there are some fun technical problems that you also will face. Mine is the traveling salesman problem. How do I efficiently route house calls across the city, given all sorts of traffic and other delays and things like that? And the technology part is a lot of fun things to solve. I want to jump ahead. I'm not going to talk too much about Best Buy. You know, I left in January. It was 10 years. Why did I stay 10 years? Spite. Most founders quit or get kicked out after a year, and I thought, I'm going to go all 15 rounds with Apollo Creed, you know. And I learned a lot. I learned that big companies aren't as smart as you think they are. And you don't know that until you do it. And if you've been reading the papers, my timing departing in January appears to have been excellent. But I had a great time. They treated me very well. They let me do whatever the hell I wanted. I tried not to abuse that freedom and power. And what I learned is that the same lessons I learned when I had no money, and I did my own marketing, and I created my own logo, are the same things that large companies have to do. They've got to continue to differentiate. They've got to stay curious. And they have to have a strong leadership culture. And so that's why now I'm ready. When I sold Geek Squad, I only had 50 employees. I just didn't know. Now I know how to run a company with 150,000 employees. I know how they operate, I know how they budget, and now I'm dangerous, because now I know what it's like to be small, and I know what it's like to be large. And now I can do both. And now I don't need anybody's help, and that's why I'm going to California. The real reason I'm going to California actually is in technology. It's probably the worst place to start a company right now. Everybody's rich, everybody's spoiled, the rent's insane, but I want to grow vegetables more than 1 month a year. And I will tell you, it's not the cold that I'm leaving. This humidity makes it very easy to say goodbye to a state that's been so good to me. But I feel like I'm leaving you in good hands. Much better than when I found it in 1990. So I've infiltrated Best Buy. Let's talk about, I want to make you feel better about the disruption that you're going to face. Because let's go through some other people who are facing disruption. Microsoft is about to launch Windows 8. I mean, they're really in a tough spot here. And they just can't create an Apple-type innovative culture overnight. They've got a lot of cultural problems, even though they make a lot of money still. It's like General Motors took 30 years to die. Even the most successful companies, could be dying, and they may not look like it. And they just announced that for the first time ever, they're going to make their own stuff. Yet 95% of all the revenues come from other partners. That's a big mind shift. Will they pull it off? I don't know. BlackBerry. I know some of you people say you like your physical keyboards. My advice is get over it. Because if you're going to be in online learning, you have to live like your customers and your students. That means you have to have a smartphone. You have to have a tablet. And it's the only way to, until you do, you can't make decisions. You have no right to be involved in a strategy unless you live like a millennial. Nintendo posted its first loss in 30 years recently. Crazy, 100-year-old company. Everybody's being disrupted. So if misery loves company, you're going to do just fine. And hopefully this makes you feel better. That's like, if you ever want to feel better about yourself, watch this TV show, Cops. Barry Diller just won a court case last week. He's going to take local HD broadcast signals, digitize them, and sell you basically something that's for free. But it's one of the many other things about the challenge to cable, which is essentially a monopoly right now. I mean, everybody hates their cable company, right? Ask most millennials if they even have cable TV, or if they care. It's called cord cutting. Paying attention to all these other kind of trends, there's nobody that's not being disrupted. I was in Munich for a conference called DLD in January when Sebastian Thrun, who runs Google X, which is their R&D program, also is a Stanford professor, renounced his tenure on stage and said he can't teach this way anymore. And said he's starting Udacity, his free online university. His speech is online, and it's a really powerful one. I recommend just search for Udacity, DLD, or Sebastian Thrun. Columbia just, I think last week, announced it's having its first chief digital officer. And not of online learning, but for the entire university. I think that's great in the short term. I think long term, every officer is a chief digital officer, and it shouldn't be. It's like I told Best Buy, don't ever have a customer service department. That implies that the rest of the company doesn't have to give customer service. This is where you try and get kind of holistic integration. And then you get whole new ways of just raising money. If you haven't seen Kickstarter yet, it's amazing. You can fund and follow creativity. There are people who are making documentaries. Even people who want to make a TV show can get it funded on here now. These two guys created this little plastic doohickey that turns your iPhone into like, it's got a little screw in there so you can mount it on one of those camera tripods you have. But you also can use it for video chats, and you carry it in your pocket. And their goal was to raise $10,000. They raised $137,000 in 6 days. Pretty amazing. I bought 2 of them. I want to talk about just learning and what's happening. When I was a kid, you might get lucky with Popular Mechanics. Maybe every 6 months they'd have something you could build like a rocket out of a paper roll tube, paper towel tube. Now there's a magazine called Make Magazine. If you haven't seen this thing and you have a niece or nephew who are kind of into just hacking away and building things, get them a subscription to this magazine. It comes out 4 times a year. In fact, this issue, that's a 3-dimensional printer that you can build yourself. I think it's like $700, $800, and it comes in the parts and you put it together, and then it's a printer that can print anything. This is going to continue to get lower and lower cost. I mean, I think kids in the future will be modifying their cars by printing the auto parts that they want. They'll be able to pick the colored plastic they want and print all those annoying colored tailpipes and the kids do. Just wait, it's going to get even more annoying. But also more creative. This is how they're going to express themselves. They're going to be able to print their own iPhone case. It's like we're going to go back to the time when my mom said, turn off that damn TV and go outside and do something. It was the best thing she ever did for me, was it kicked me out of the house. And now I'll be able to print up all sorts of fun and interesting things. This has turned into a movement. So when you think about online learning, it's just one of many channels. This is another form of learning, getting together face-to-face in conferences. This magazine now is a conference. It's called the Maker Faire. They have them all over the world now. People getting together. It's not just technology, it's just sharing how they're making things. There's a revolution going on. And I agree with the people who are promoting the idea that this implies manufacturing in China is not the end game. That manufacturing will get less expensive. Manufacturing is starting to move actually in bits and pieces here in the US. It's not over. China may graduate 300,000 engineers a year, but that country lived under communism for a long time. And before that, for thousands of years, the Chinese have a wholly different way of looking about society. Americans are more, for good or worse, Americans are about individual and can-do attitude. That's something that takes centuries and generations to create. No one's going to replace America's entrepreneurism like that. No way. And this is why I'm not too worried about the rise of China or anything like that. We used to beat ourselves up over Japan in the 80s. We don't even make TVs in this country anymore, but we make the software that runs on those TVs. And out of that community, there's one called Arduino. This was created by an Italian electronics engineering professor. It's a cheap little board that lets you basically hook up the physical world to the online world. And it's like those little Heath kits from the 1970s. Again, if I were 10 years old, it's so much easier now. I mean, you could be 10 years old and getting a master's level in electronics engineering just by playing with this stuff that's cheap. This just came out 3 months ago. It's called Raspberry Pi. It's a $25 computer that fits in a matchbox. A full PC, processor, memory, USB. That's the bigger one that fits in a pack of cigarettes, and the one there is smaller than a USB stick. A full computer. You know what you could do with that in your treehouse? On the other end of the do-it-yourself front, here's a fellow Minnesotan. Her name's Amanda Hocking. You may have heard of her. She's known for being a self-publisher on Kindle's publishing platform. This is an article not too long ago. She's made millions self-publishing just through Amazon. And what's so interesting is that people are just doing it themselves. And when they do it themselves, one of my favorite questions to ask a crowd is, I recommend you do this when you get together with your teams. And I'm going to keep us on time here, so I'm going to check here. We're almost out of time. Are you guys okay to eat up some of your break for Q&A?
Yeah.
Okay, because I'll answer anything you want. Here's my favorite question to ask people now. In the last year, what have you taught yourself to do that you've never done before just by watching a YouTube video? Can you get a show of hands? Okay, I want you to shout out like what you've done.
Celtic bar nodding.
Okay?
100 ways to tie a scarf.
100 ways to tie a scarf. I only found 5, so I need to find your video. Build action script? Okay, you trying to put me out of business? Who else?
Photographing the moon at night.
Photographing the moon at night. Yeah, who else? Anybody got a good doozy?
Drywall, muddy, passing, sand.
Exactly, I had to patch a hole too. In a weird kind of one. Who else? You built a birdhouse. See, as somebody for 20 years who's been paid to come to people's homes and do things for them, and people are always apologizing to me, I'm sorry I'm so stupid about this computer thing. I don't hear that much anymore. What's so exciting is you're learning how to learn. And once you build a birdhouse, or you do an action script, or you learn to poach an egg, or do a scarf, I think it enhances your confidence, and when you feel more curious about things. And then you've learned how to use YouTube, and then you can really, you know that you have the confidence that you can do anything. I think we're on the verge of, the transistor came out in 48, the personal computer, the microprocessor came out in the 70s, that led to the personal computers in the 80s, but they couldn't talk to each other. So we got the internet. Then with the browser, we could see all that information. But it took some time for the programmers to make cool apps, and then YouTube comes around. And we got social networking in the last 10 years. So now what? Well, with the smartphone, with 2 cameras, high definition touchscreen, you can learn anywhere. It's like it's all coming together right now. Right now, we just passed 50% penetration in smartphones. So we still have half the country that doesn't have one. That's amazing. And I think we're in the 3rd major revolution in human history. The first one I would say is Gutenberg's movable type, that democratized information. And I absolutely believe from the 1300s, it led to the Renaissance, it led to the Enlightenment. Then we get the steam engine in the 1800s, which led to the Industrial Revolution. But that took decades for the steam engine to find its way into railroad engines and manufacturing. So it's no accident that the transistor in 48 took 60 plus years to get to where we are now. And we're just now beginning to touch everybody else. That's what's so exciting. And of course that leads us to Khan Academy. I'm sure you've heard about that. What a great story though, because each time one of these things happens, it gives everybody else confidence. Well, I could do that too. So in the future, kind of everybody's a geek. This one is called, what's that called? Teachers, helping teachers. What's it called? Teachers Pay Teachers. I heard about this one. This one's amazing. I mean, think about it. One type of online university is that a professor becomes a university of one. So if you're the best 7th grade biology teacher in the world, you can create the best lesson plan and sell that online to other teachers. And this ability to copy, or steal information from each other and then even get paid for it offers a whole new model. On one hand, I dropped out of college because I didn't want to end up with all the student loan debt in the 1990s. And I looked at myself as starting a company. And I know there's a lot of disruption going on in education, but I've learned that disruption is essential to the next round of innovation. My niece, when I saw her this last holiday, I said, how are you doing? How's Madison going? Oh, I dropped out. I don't know if I'm going to go back. I can't afford it. My advice to her was, this may sound unorthodox, but Yale, Stanford, MIT are putting all their courses online, and they won't give you a degree, but they'll give you a certificate of completion. I'll tell you what, if somebody knocked on my door and said, I couldn't afford to go to college, So I built my own curriculum. I took classes online. I completed all the assignments. I got these certificates of completion. You can go on the websites and verify that I did. And I would tell you I'd hire that person in a minute. I'd at least give them a shot. So teachers pay teachers, and I got iBooks. You can make your own textbooks. God, there's so many things I want to do. And tablets and low cost and all this technology. It feels like it did in the 1980s when I got my first computer. It felt like the first time I saw a web browser, only this is better. And that's it. Thank you. So we're supposed to go to break now, but why don't we take a couple questions, and then I'll still, how about we go for like 10 minutes, and then I'll get you a good 20-minute break. I'm happy to answer any questions. If you raise your hand, I'll repeat the question so you can all hear it. Yes, sir.
Willing to tell us what your California plans are, or where
What are my California plans? Yeah, well, I'm going to take some time off because when you do something for 18 years, I feel like being married or dating somebody for 18 years. I just don't think the first thing you should do is go bar hopping and looking to pick people up. So I'm not looking to jump right into anything else. I'm not going to go to a large company. Ron Johnson, when he was at Apple, tried to recruit me, but I knew Steve Jobs was going to be gone, and I really didn't want to go to another company. Having to deal with the loss of a founder and have to compete. And when you go to a big company, it takes about 5 years to build trust. And I'm well liked and respected at Best Buy, and I had a great time there. But I don't want to spend another 5 to 10 years at another big company. I want to start a company, or I'm either going to start a company that couldn't exist without the advent of these technologies. And my area is, I believe everybody's in the service business, which is something I know very well. I believe technology, everybody's in the technology business, or has to, or they'll be disrupted or put out of business. I'm really into culture. Employee culture is how you sustain a company, and ultimately it leads to a brand. So I'm probably going to do one of two things. I'm going to either start a company that couldn't exist until you had enough smartphones in the world and the technology that we have, or I'm going to buy a company that's undervalued or neglected because it didn't apply these concepts, and which I could buy it inexpensively like Warren Buffett. Only my plan is to never take them public, keep them private, live off the dividend. 10 years ago, I was 30, and I didn't have the patience to wait 20 years to grow Geek Squad that slowly. So I used Best Buy to kind of slingshot it with their power and stuff to get it around the world. Now I've made my reputation. But now I'm 43, and the 40s are great. I thought it would happen at 30 because I was a father at 29. I thought when I was 30, I thought I'd be, wise and stuff like that. You've only lived on your own for about 10 years. It's just not enough life experience. But boy, when you turn 40, something really did happen. It's like, God, I stopped wasting my time on things I don't care about anymore. And I have a much closer, smaller, but better circle of friends. I know who I am and I know who I'm not. And therefore, it applies to your career stuff. So, but I'm going to take my time. I'm going to grow vegetables. The first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to rub it into everybody I know in Minnesota in January. Get my family settled. I'm just going to explore because there's so much going on right now. The big risk is that I try to do more than one thing at a time. It's going to take me 6 months. I've got a ton of ideas. It's going to take me 6 months at least to whittle it down to one idea. The best thing I ever did with Geeks was I focused on the service. I never made money selling computers or hardware. So that's my plan right now. And it feels fun to be a freshman again. Yes?
You have an adolescent at home, sounds like?
I have a 14-year-old daughter. She was a big reason why, because she starts high school. So if you're going to disrupt your family, I wanted to go 10 years ago, but I didn't want Best Buy screwing up Geek Squad, so I had to stick around for a few years. And then, I would have gone 5 years ago, but I want to pull my daughter out of, elementary school. So she was probably the biggest reason for timing it now. She starts high school, so I think this is the least disruptive time. It's not like I'm moving her to, Nebraska. I mean,
Do you think there will be any value to her to have any kind of traditional college degree?
Want to repeat the question?
Is there any value to having a traditional college degree? That's a tough one because I don't want to drop out. In fact, I still plan on getting my degree in art history. I think that, the main thing, the advice I give, I just gave a friend's son who's 17 yesterday on the phone some advice. He wants to get an iPhone programming, and I said, programming is obviously the hot area, but learning a technical skill, one of my favorite quotes is that learning the technical skills will teach you the answers to the questions, but without the humanities, it won't teach you which questions are worth asking. So if you're going to differentiate, even as an engineer, because we're in a design era now, design is about more than just engineering and functional problem solving. It's about thinking through human interaction. And that means I think you have to have a base of literature and philosophy and the humanities. And so that's something that I think is going to be important. Now somebody could make the argument, well, you could learn all that. I'm taking a Yale course on ancient Greek history through iTunes University on my phone. I play the lectures in my car when I drive around like I did this morning. In terms of a degree, I think if there's some way to know that there's a way to prove that you completed something, that could provide disruption, but I don't necessarily know the answer to that question. Only she'll be able to answer that. I just hope that she feels comfortable enough to decide for herself. But I do think that, your careers are safe and stuff like that. It's like journalism isn't going to go away because there's YouTube. If anything, when anyone can publish, good old-fashioned editing and writing and curation have more value than ever. That's why if you send a handwritten note to somebody right now, it has more power because it's so easy to send a text message. That's why I've stopped giving gift cards as gifts because it's really just like a cop-out. So, I don't know if I answered your question or not, but just like everybody else, I'm not entirely sure. I just worry about the cost. It's a lot of money and a lot of debt. And I wouldn't want that debt to change somebody's mindset and freedom of experimentation when they get out of school. Yes, sir?
You talked about Microsoft, for example, as a large bureaucracy that's having trouble with disruptive influences. In terms of education, we look at higher education institutions or K through 12 that are entrenched in a certain way of dealing with things. How might they respond to some of these new initiatives like Udacity or Coursera, given their traditional role?
Good question. So what can traditional institutions do to disrupt themselves and experiment? Well, I go back to the hackers. All that these people are doing in most disruptions is they're just doing what's possible now. That's why I said, get rid of your BlackBerry. Get rid of your rotary dial phone. Get an iPhone. And get an iPhone, okay? Don't even pick a fight with me on the technical merits of Android versus iPhone, okay? I love Android. I think it's great. It still needs work because Google's run by engineers. And there's a reason why iPhone is number one, but I won't get into that. But just get one, okay? They're not that expensive, and it'll save you money. It'll help your career. I recommend, first of all, use the stuff. I struggled at Best Buy because I simultaneously want to bring people in and pull them in, and executives who are very well compensated and very full of themselves, but somehow to gently say, the rug is about to be pulled out from underneath you. And I'm worried that it came across as saying, well, you have to be a geek about Twitter. That you have to like Facebook. You have to love cell phones. You don't. But you sure as shit better understand why it's an important trend. You need to understand why there were 22,000 texts per minute when President Obama announced the killing of Osama bin Laden, or why people are tweeting during sporting events. So you must form a point of view. Now you can form a point of view that you hate cell phones, but uncover, okay, why do you hate them? What is it about you hate about them? And how can that be useful as an insight to the thing? So take your points of view and then you get together and you share them. The last thing I recommend you do is you need to create your evil twin. And that is, what would somebody do if they had zero respect for your institutions and your traditions and just said, well, this is just a new way to do it? I gave mine the recommendation, okay, if you're not going to go to college, I still think you should learn, and you need to demonstrate to the world that you know how to finish what you start. And what better thing than if they had created their own curriculum? So do what you would do if you couldn't afford to go to your school. Because then if you communicate that, and the only person I think who can do that is the CEO or the head of the organization. The fish stinks from the head down. Because the job of the executive is to give permission to the culture to innovate and experiment. And if they're not on the damn dance floor, nobody else is going to stick their neck out. That is so important. So I recommend you actively, this is what I recommended to Best Buy before I left. I said, as soon as Circuit City went out of business, I said, we're in trouble. They're like, what do you mean? We just killed off our biggest competitor. I said, I watched America lose its edge when the Soviet Union fell. I miss our old enemies, the Russians. They made us a better country. Do you think we ever would have gone to the moon if it wasn't for Sputnik? Where's your Sputnik? That's the evil twin. The evil twin makes you a better organization. So what I recommend is that you hack your organization. Cut your budgets and play these scenarios out. But they absolutely should be a small team. I recommend the 2 pizza rule. A team should not be bigger than what you can feed with 2 pizzas. And they should report to the head of the very, very top of the organization. And if that person is not up to the task, then find an organization that has the guts to do that. What have you got to lose? 2 pizza teams are inexpensive. The technology is cheap. And it's a lot cheaper than hiring a consultant. How about one more question, and I'll let you guys go to break. Anybody? Yes?
How do you separate the wheat from the chaff? There's so much information being thrown at you on Twitter, Facebook, whatever.
How do you separate the wheat from the chaff? You mean with information?
Yeah.
I don't know. You just read a lot. And when you have a point of view and you stay curious, you're combining the question mark with the exclamation point. Your point of view is what guides you in your interest areas, but your curiosity keeps you open to new ideas. I get arguments all the time. People say, Facebook is turning everybody into narcissists. Oh, please. That's a cop-out. No, find out why do 800 million people use it, and how can it be useful to you? So if you're so much smarter than all these narcissists in social media, then I expect that you will be even better at it. To make it useful then, and not just cosmetic. That's what's so great about Twitter, because you start with your 5 favorite authors, your 3 favorite columnists, your 2 favorite sports teams. Watch how they use the technology.